I've been asked to share some thoughts on the Catholic social teaching principle on peace and disarmament, which we all know is critical in this present-day world, so fractured by violence and war. The roots of the teaching can be found in Scripture, particularly in Isaiah's vision of a peaceable kingdom and in the teachings of Jesus. More recently, it is reflected in the statements of Vatican II and the promulgations of recent popes and bishops. In his dying day, Pope John XXIII worked on Pacem et Terris, his vision of peace. In it, he says, all people must work to bring about peace in all relationships. Vatican II ruled out the use of weapons of mass destruction, and in his famous address to the UN, Pope Paul VI said, "Never again war, no, never again war." The U.S. bishops, in the challenge of peace, call us to strengthen peacemaking as an essential element of our faith. Catholic social teaching promotes peace as a positive, action-oriented concept. The words of John Paul II say, "Peace is not just the absence of war. It involves mutual respect and confidence between peoples and nations." Peace, then, is the fruit of justice and is dependent upon right relationships. Our mission, to live and work that all people may be united with God and one another, requires us to be apostles, marked by docility to the Spirit, expressed in a spirit of gentleness, joy, and peace. There is inherent in our mission a challenge to work against the culture of separateness, where we lose sight of our connectedness, where peoples and countries can be pitted against one another. Our mission, supported by our core values, is to work to achieve unity, for we believe that God created the human race as one, to live in peace. Today's society can often seduce me into thinking of violence in its many forms as normative. Fear, anger, power can be the gauges I use to define the goodies and baddies. It's critical to be conscious of these forces that can erode my inner peace and how I relate to others. Maxim 6 urges us to live a life of inner and outer peace and charity toward the neighbor. Not an easy response in today's climate of fear and disunity that confronts us all. The task of peacemaking is a choice and a challenge, forcing us to change our attitudes and words and moving us to action. If peacemaking is a choice, so also is violence and war. Weapons of mass destruction are a threat to world peace. Pope Benedict XVI, in his 2006 World Day of Peace, said, "In a nuclear war, there are no victors, only victims." How can we ever forget the legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where hundreds of thousands of people were killed in just 9 seconds, and tens of thousands of others have died slow, horrible deaths over time? Peacemaking calls us to educate ourselves about efforts for peace and disarmament in order to influence our government's policies, to emphasize conflict resolution through negotiation and diplomacy, rather than death and annihilation. Information and suggested actions are available through Network, Pax Christi, and other reliable sources. In the midst of all this, there is some good news. On December 22nd, our Senate approved the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, START, which is a critical step toward a world free of nuclear weapons. So despite uncertainties, there can be optimism for a more peaceable world. But it is up to each one of us to resolve to be the active instruments of peacemaking called for by our mission and Catholic social teachings.